Merry Christmas to all, it's your pal NOMZ here, back with one final video before the end of the year, hoping to spread some of that sweet Christmas cheer. To buy you a beer, I would if I could, but let's settle for the kettle, as I regale you with a tale.
I'm speaking in rhyme!
Seeing that it's the holiday season, and this being the time of giving, reflection, and rejoicing in the company of your loved ones, I figured perhaps we could all bask together, you and I, in the warm, comforting glow of one of cinema's greatest modern Christmas films, and one that has stood the test of time and left a beloved legacy for millions and will continue to do so for millions to come. And that film is Ron Howard's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, released in the year 2000, which is based off the timeless children's book written by legendary author Dr. Seuss, rest in peace. Now, this is Ron Howard's film, and this is Dr. Seuss's story, but the MVP of this movie that made it all click was none other than comedy master and entertainment king, the legend himself, none other than Mr. Jim Carrey.
You know, their parent says, "You know who that is? That's the Grinch." And I go, "I must find a way to stop Christmas from coming." You know, and their parents go, "Oh, I thought it was makeup."
And then you add on top of that the involvement of two additional legends, that being the wise, sage-like storytelling voice of Anthony Hopkins as the narrator. If you can somehow blot out the fact that he also possesses the menacing voice of Hannibal Lecter. And of course, the legendary musical genius of James Horner. Well, what you've got yourself there is a recipe for sheer Christmas movie magic. Ron Howard's The Grinch That Stole Christmas follows the basic outline of Dr. Seuss's story, but obviously, this being a feature-length film, it needed to take some creative license, and so the script writers needed to generate some additional story and characters to fill the runtime, and some will likely point to this as a flaw with the movie itself. The fact that it takes its time before getting to the final act of the story, because, well, at least they'd probably say, the runtime is quote-unquote bloated with pointless filler, but that is an absolutely ridiculous notion in the case of The Grinch. As far as I've researched anyway, Dr. Seuss's widow not only collaborated with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, and approved most, if not all, of the new additions and tweaks to her husband's story, again, for the sake of making it a feature-length film, but Audrey Geisel, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, vetoed many early ideas for the script, including putting the Grinch in the world of green eggs and ham, as well as things like bathroom humor and having the Grinch being a teenage delinquent. Initially, Ron Howard wasn't meant to helm the film. Brian Grazer brought him in after Geisel disliked an earlier proposal from Grazer's initial choice for director. Ron Howard, however, changed his mind about wanting to make the movie over the course of a plane trip to meet with Geisel, where she approved Howard and Grazer's new proposal for a script on the condition that Jim Carrey must be the one to play the Grinch. For that, Mrs. Geisel, we thank you. Rest in peace. And once you've actually seen the movie, it should be no wonder why Geisel was such a fan of the new proposal. Yes, there are alterations and changes and additions to her husband's story, but it's all to amplify the story's core themes.
Just try to look at the book and look at what Dr. Seuss's original intent was. I think he intended to show people what Christmas was all about, to show us ourselves at Christmas time. Christmas is so much bigger than the commercialism of Christmas. And I think that's what he was trying to say, is that at the heart of Christmas, no matter how commercial it gets, it will get you because it means something. It's about family and love and acceptance. It's the thing that makes people realize we're all part of a family.
To accomplish this, yes, the story is still very much centered around the Grinch character, but there's a far greater emphasis on the relatively minor character, no pun intended, from Dr. Seuss's original story called Cindy Lou Who, because she in the book is only in the story for just a couple of pages, but she's also only around 2 years old. Whereas in Ron Howard's version, she's been aged up to about 6, and she has a crucial part to play in the story from start to finish. In addition to that, she also plays the point of view character for the audience, particularly the younger audience who is the primary demographic. Cindy Lou's character is that of a nonconformist who is immensely curious about the Grinch, and thus the perfect character to connect the audience to Dr. Seuss's world.
Why won't anyone talk about the Grinch? Little kids and the Grinch.
Because the characters can deliver the exposition the audience needs to know to a character who is as equally clueless as we are. The biggest difference, however, between the book and the movie is that Cindy Lou, instead of just being a random child who nearly foils the Grinch's plan in the original story, actually has an integral part to play in helping the Grinch not only understand the true meaning of Christmas and why it's something to celebrate and cherish, but also the entirety of Whoville as well, who has also forgotten the true meaning of Christmas. The moral of Dr. Seuss's story is that Christmas is not about materialism. The gift giving is simply a byproduct of what Christmas is really about. Putting aside the actual religious meaning itself, Christmas is about love and togetherness with those you hold dear. In Ron Howard's adaptation of The Grinch, the commercialization of Christmas and shallow materialistic greed has all but completely taken over Whoville.
Dad?
Yeah?
Doesn't this seem like a bit much?
This is what Christmas is all about.
As for the Grinch himself and why he hates Christmas, this is kept very ambiguous in the original story, but is actually given a lot more backstory in the movie that not only enriches the overall narrative, as well as giving purpose to the supporting characters, of which there are several, but logically speaking, what would one think causes the Grinch to hate Christmas and not only that, but also become a recluse? Obviously, this means something would have had to have happened that makes the Grinch not only not want to celebrate Christmas, but also hate being around other people as well. So as Cindy Lou Who investigates the matter, it turns out that the Grinch and the Christmas season got off on the wrong foot from the very beginning. See, the way the movie explains it, the Grinch, like many other Whos, calmly fall to the sky to the front porches of their parents' home. Basically another variant to the classic Visit from the Stork children's fib on how babies actually get here. This is a children's movie after all. But see, the Grinch arrived in Whoville on Christmas Eve and was left out in the cold all night, wailing while his carers were having a Christmas party. From then on, he was never fond of Christmas until he garners the attention of Martha May, who, despite the fact that the Grinch is somewhat of an outcast due to his unusual appearance, she actually manages to find herself attracted to him.
You know, Christmas is my favorite time of year.
Ron Howard and the other scriptwriters opted for a very classic, bullied at school kind of spin on the Grinch's upbringing, which makes sense given that basically everything about the Grinch screams outcast, really.
You know, I think that he's great. I've always been kind of a little bit of an outsider, and I think that he's the ultimate outsider. You know, he's the ultimate disenfranchised guy, you know, the person who doesn't fit in, that isn't part of the club. And it was great to kind of look at this character, and the story of his change of heart has always been really important to me. You know, that anybody's reachable. Most people just want to be part of the party and part of the club. And if you give them the opportunity, they will be.
But Martha was the one person besides his carers who actually seemed to like him for just being himself. Whereas basically everyone else put him down for his appearance. But because Martha takes a liking to the Grinch, he finally, just once, gets into the Christmas spirit and makes her an angel out of household items. Augustus Mayhew, his classroom bully and who also eventually becomes the mayor, also has a crush on Martha, so he puts the Grinch down for being green and hairy, saying that Martha will never like him back. Like any classic insecure bully, the only way he can feel better about himself is to put the Grinch down. Unfortunately, however, the Grinch, now self-conscious about his appearance, probably for the first time ever, decides to try shaving the day prior to giving Martha her gift, but it ends up making him look ridiculous, causing the entire classroom to start laughing at him. The only one who doesn't laugh is Martha, who is actually taken by the fact that the Grinch went out of his way to give her a gift from the heart. But then the Grinch, utterly humiliated at this point, flips out, trashes the presents, including the one he made, as well as the Christmas tree, causing the whole class to fly into a panic, and then the Grinch retreats to the solitude of Mount Crumpet, and no one in Whoville, including the ones that actually cared about him, have seen him since.
And that was the last time we ever saw him. The very last time.
Which is enough for anyone with a beating pulse to feel sorry for the guy. I remember watching this when I was a kid, and damn, I nearly weeped. I felt so bad for him.
I hate Christmas! I hate it!
Anyway, this prompts Cindy Lou to take action, and so she takes it upon herself to invite the Grinch to an annual Whoville Christmas celebration that she nominated him for, much to the chagrin of the now mayor of Whoville, who hates him.
What do you want?
I came to invite you to be holiday cheermeister.
The Grinch is all like,
That's a good one.
but Cindy tells him Martha May will be there, which appears to pique his interest, but it turns out he's just humouring Cindy, and he sends her back to Whoville down a trapdoor. The Grinch then spends the next hour or so arguing with himself about whether he should in fact go to the event, but eventually his dog makes the choice for him, sending the Grinch down that same trapdoor.
No, yes, no, yes. No, yes.
Initially, the Grinch just wants to do a quick hi and bye after he collects his Holiday Cheermeister award, but the Who's then kind of ambush him with all of their Christmas customs, like eating contests and dancing, and it's hilarious because the Grinch looks like he could not be having a worse time.
I've slipped into the seventh circle of hell. Thank you.
Which the mayor of Whoville, being the giant narcissist that he is, reaps enormous glee from, but as it goes on, it appears the Grinch is actually enjoying himself. What's funny about this is that it's not so much that he's embracing the Christmas spirit, but it's more like he's being forced into submitting to it. But regardless, the Grinch starts to have a good time, so the mayor, remember his old childhood bully from elementary school, again, out of sheer narcissism and pettiness, plays a cruel prank on him and tries to make him relive his worst memory by making him unbox an electric shaver similar to the one he used as a kid that ultimately led to him getting humiliated in front of his crush, Martha, who, just FYI, is now the mayor's girlfriend, or at least he acts like she is. And to rub some additional salt on the wound that he just gave the Grinch, he decides to propose to Martha right there in front of both him and the rest of the entire town. Now, you see, for the mayor, who appears to have the most upbeat and cheery attitude towards Christmas, hence another reason why the Grinch cannot stand him,
Loathe entirely.
but Christmas for the mayor is all about materialism, which is basically the one quality he has to offer that can garner him Martha's attention. But it's only after this the Grinch's rage reaches boiling point, and he just unapologetically lets the entirety of Whoville have it.
That's what it's always been about.
Yes, 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 yes.
The film also shows that the Grinch's perspective on Christmas isn't entirely wrong either. He finds the materialism of Christmas incredibly stupid, because it never lasts, and yet it always manages to repeat itself.
You want to know what happens to your gifts? They all come to me. In your garbage. You see what I'm saying? In your garbage.
The avarice never ends.
I want golf clubs. I want diamonds. I want a pony so I can ride it twice, get bored, and sell it to make glue.
He's not wrong about all the hype and build-up surrounding the Christmas season largely being a ginormous waste that's mostly forgotten about by the week after the holiday is over.
Look, I don't want to make waves,
But this whole Christmas season is stupid, stupid, stupid.
Again, the Grinch has a very good point, but like the Who's that he despises, he is still missing the big picture when it comes to the importance of Christmas, which is what Cindy Lou spends the bulk of the movie trying to get everyone to see. The irony, of course, is that she's only able to accomplish this when the Grinch robs the Who's of all of their materialistic possessions, leaving them with absolutely nothing except each other, which has precisely the opposite effect than the Grinch intended, but we'll get to that. As I said, the Grinch That Stole Christmas live-action film is shockingly faithful to the original story by Dr. Seuss, and what some may criticize about the additions to the middle act of the film, basically all of it was used to build on and amplify the thematic meaning of the story. Not only that, but the script even keeps a similar style of writing that Dr. Seuss used when he wrote the original story, placing a heavy reliance on rhyming to tell the story, particularly in the narration by Anthony Hopkins.
The whippoorwinds whipped high above the Who town. A trip or a slip, you'd slide all the way down. But this girl had a mission. She knew what to do. She'd invite the Grinch herself, that brave Cindy Lou.
Not only that, but much of Dr. Seuss's actual writing from the original story was inserted into the script word for word.
Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee.
And now
Grinned the Grinch.
I stuff up the tree.
But the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sounded merry. But it was merry. Very.
Back to my point about the creative license the movie takes to stretch out the story's length for the movie's runtime. As I said, it all goes to serve the themes of the original story, and in doing so enhances it, well, at least for the most part. For example, this iconic excerpt from the original book where the Grinch stops at a random house to steal the Christmas goods and meets Cindy Lou, but in the movie, he already has prior history with her, having already saved her life once, and also Cindy reaching out to him with her compassion to try and help him mend his broken relationship with the Who's, and with Christmas itself, which really does make the scene that much better. The only issue I really have with it, and it's nothing to get too bent over, but since these characters have met before and the Grinch almost completely blows his disguise when he does this,
Santa, what's Christmas really about?
Vengeance!
the scene still plays out in a way that's very faithful to the book, but you also get to see that the Grinch, in his lie, also kind of breaks Cindy's heart when he reinforces the misconception that Christmas is about materialism, which in regards to this scene is something the film definitely gets right.
Presents.
I was afraid of that.
Also, this additional exchange between the characters is enough to impale you right in the feels.
Santa, don't forget the Grinch. I know he's mean and hairy and smelly. His hands might be cold and clammy. But I think he's actually kind of sweet.
Sweet!
You think he's sweet?
Merry Christmas, Santa.
But back to my issue, I get that it's implied that the disguise itself is good enough to fool Cindy, but it's still really hard to believe given how smart and perceptive this very movie has made her character out to be, and also the fact that because she's had several recent interactions with the Grinch, it's really hard to suspend your disbelief that she wouldn't realize it's him. Now, I know some of you might say that it's odd that I'm choosing to fixate on this as opposed to, say, the Grinch constructing a rocket ship Santa sleigh in a matter of hours on the night of Christmas Eve, which did not happen in the original story. Instead, it's just a regular sleigh with the Grinch and his dog. But the original story of the Grinch never took itself seriously in terms of logistics, such as having the Grinch's tiny dog pull a multi-ton sleigh up a 3,000-foot mountain, which is also in the movie. But all Ron Howard was really doing with his film was making it feel bigger and more bombastic for entertainment value, which worked gangbusters, not only with certain aspects of the movie itself, but also with Jim Carrey's performance complementing that.
We're gonna die! We're gonna die! Mommy, tell it to stop!
Almost lost my cool there.
So yeah, getting hung up on the logistics of The Grinch, when it's an incredibly light-hearted film in that aspect, is just completely moronic. However, the story itself is taken very seriously because it has important morals and lessons and themes. And also because this was an aspect of the story that was deliberately changed for the movie, that despite adding tons of positives, ultimately had one mild drawback. Anyway, skipping ahead, the Grinch steals Christmas through a series of Jim Carrey's hilarious antics. Max pulls the sleigh up to the top of Mount Crumpet, and the movie culminates in much the same way as the original story, though with a far more developed point of view from the side of the Who's. Initially, Cindy is blamed, but then her father steps in and tells the mayor and the entire town that the Grinch may have stolen the presents and the feast, but he didn't steal Christmas, because like Cindy tried to tell him, Christmas isn't about any of that. It's about family and friendship and love and rejoicing in the company of one another.
I'm glad he took our presents. You can't hurt Christmas, Mr. Mayor, because it isn't about the gifts or the contests or the fancy lights. That's what Cindy's been trying to tell everyone. And me. He's been trying to tell me. Well, I don't need anything more for Christmas than this right here. My family.
And ironically enough, it took the Grinch stealing Christmas for Whoville to figure that out. The mayor maintains his shallow, petulant outlook on the matter, But the rest of the Who's down in Whoville start to celebrate Christmas Day just like it was any other, and so all of them join hands and start singing. Meanwhile, on the top of Mount Crumpet, just as the Grinch is going to destroy all of the Who's possessions once and for all, he hears the echoing sound of jovial singing on the wind and realizes that he failed to stop Christmas from coming. It's only then that the Grinch finally realizes the true meaning of Christmas himself.
Maybe Christmas doesn't come from a star. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more.
Then, of course, he has this incredibly memeable moment where his heart starts to grow and he begins to finally feel love for the first time.
I'm feeling.
And he actually starts to break down in tears, and then he also shares this adorable moment with his dog Max.
I love you. Yeah.
A few moments later.
Beat it! Get out of here.
All of a sudden, the sleigh and the presents are beginning to slip off the mountain, and the Grinch realizes that he can't let that happen. Try as he might, he can't lift the enormous weight of the giant sleigh and all of those presents. That is until he realizes that Cindy Lou's life is in danger, because turns out she snuck up to Mount Crumpet just because she didn't want the Grinch to be alone on Christmas Day.
What are you doing up there?
No one should be alone on Christmas.
This moves the Grinch beyond words, and although it sounds incredibly cliche and cheesy to say out loud, he finds the strength through the power of love to lift the giant sleigh, saving both Cindy Lou and all of the presents as well. Just like in the original story, the Grinch rides down the mountain and returns to the Who's their Christmas presents and the food for the feast. He even apologizes publicly for what he did and insists that he be punished, an idea that the absolutely shameless mayor is fully in support of, but the police officer decides to let the Grinch off scot-free since he did the right thing and returned all of the possessions, so no harm, no foul. In another cathartic moment, Martha May also rejects the mayor's proposal and decides that she wants to be with the Grinch, who in a nice bit of sweet revenge proceeds to laugh right in front of the mayor's fat face.
No hard feelings. Cheer up, dude. It's Christmas.
The Grinch then starts singing along with the Who's, and just like in the original story, he carves the roast beast at the big giant feast, although in an extra added detail, he decides to host Christmas dinner for the entirety of Whoville in his cave up on Mount Crumpet, which was a nice touch on the ending. The movie then slowly transitions to credits with James Horner's beautiful melody to close out the movie, and voila, you have yourself a Christmas classic right there. Before I wrap up this review, there's just some elements I neglected to mention that really aid in giving The Grinch That Stole Christmas its movie magic. As I mentioned, Jim Carrey's performance was doing much of the heavy lifting, but there was also a ton of moments that Jim Carrey himself decided to improvise that really lent well to the decision to go big with the maniacal comedy of the Grinch character. For example, in this scene, the Grinch was meant to make a giant mess when he yanks the tablecloth, but miraculously, Jim Carrey managed to pull the cloth without anything falling to the ground, and so Jim Carrey does this. Also, when the Grinch goes to change into his robe behind the coverings, and he does this... Yeah, apparently that was also improvised. There's plenty more I could go into, but the one I really want to talk about, because it was only recently brought to my attention, although as far as I've seen it's only a rumor, albeit a very compelling one, is this small scene between the Grinch and Max when he's doing a director's parody, but apparently he was actively mocking one director in particular. The giveaway is when the Grinch puts on the director's cap, like who else has been seen more wearing one of those than none other than Ron Howard himself. So the rumor goes that Jim Carrey was given creative license for this scene to just take the absolute piss out of Ron Howard, who apparently found it hilarious, and if all of this is true, then it just makes this scene like a million times better than it already is. Some of the more superficial aspects of this film are the costumes and the set designs and everything that lends to the atmosphere of the movie, all of which are excellent, and surprisingly enough, still looks good 20 years later. I mean, look, I'm not one of those guys who is so petulantly insistent that movies have to always use practical effects to hold up, because there are many examples of practical effects that show their age after a certain amount of time, not to mention there are limitations to what practical effects can accomplish, just as there is both pros and cons to a reliance on computer imagery. And that's a case-by-case thing, but hot damn, the costumes and makeup departments went to town on this film. Jim Carrey had to sit through 8 hours of makeup preparation each day for principal photography, and you know what? It was all well worth it, because these actors still look like characters in this universe, even though the Who's and the Grinch are just people wearing makeup and costumes, but none of their performances have aged because of it. And that is a clear representation of quality right there. Not to mention the design of Whoville and the architecture and the props and the Christmas decor all blend together seamlessly to make you feel like you're immersed in Dr. Seuss's world.
When Ron called me about the Grinch and asked me if I was interested, I said, yeah, of course. You know, it was like a dream come true. I always wanted to do a big fantasy film where virtually everyone is makeup.
In trying to create a total new dimension and new world, we needed great makeups and great makeup designs. And Rick has proven himself year after year, movie after movie, to be the best.
Part of what I do, you know, is being a makeup designer is, you know, I try to design makeups that work, you know, not only that look good, but actually that the actor can move. And that was part of the challenge, not only to come up with a design for the Grinch that just in a still picture looks like the Grinch, but Jim Carrey has this incredibly expressive face. And I didn't want to be the one to limit what he can do with his face. So you have to take all that into consideration. It's, you know, as thick as we could make it in areas where I knew we could make it thicker, and it's actually tissue thin in many areas of his face so that he could do all those expressions.
You could put the Grinch makeup on 8 people and line them up, and if they're just standing still, you might not know which one is Jim Carrey. But the minute they start moving, certainly the minute they open their mouths, there's no question.
Taylor Momsen was outstanding as Cindy Lou Who. I know some, not many, but some will likely trash her acting ability, calling it wooden or something else just as vacuous and idiotic, simply because she's young and wasn't playing a 16-dimensional character. You know, the same kind of know-nothings that threw shade at Jake Lloyd's performance as young Anakin Skywalker. But she, like Jake Lloyd, fulfilled her role completely by being exactly what she needed to be. A sweet, kind, optimistic, curious, and well-meaning child character who has a meaningful role in the story. And by all accounts, she and Jim Carrey got along great and really enjoyed working together too.
Did you have a little conversation with Taylor about not being intimidated that she's
not being in my light?
Yes. No,
that was the first thing I told her.
About not being intimidated by working with Jim Carrey.
Oh no, I didn't have to. She was super cool, you know, and it's not an intimidating thing. I don't live to intimidate people, you know. I don't come on the set and go like, watch me fly, you know, that kind of thing. It's you know, we're all part of the team. She's so important to the story.
He's from Canada, you know, and I used to give him candy bars on the set from Canada. I used to give him toffee, and he said, "This is awesome, Taylor." But my favorite chocolate candy bar was a Crunch bar, and I kept forgetting the name. We're like, okay, we gotta get that for him at the end of the movie. I kept forgetting the name. I couldn't remember the name.
And we got along great, and she was buying me Crunchies, which is my favorite Canadian chocolate bar, and so she was plying me with Crunchies all the time, you know. That was sweet.
He really enjoyed that, and he tells the funny story that I used to give him too much candy before he did his lines and before he went on. It would get him all hyped up and make him forget his lines.
She was very good at what she did, and just a real kind of unaffected kid, you know. And her little sister was around all the time, and she was so sweet too. It was great fun working with her.
Also, regarding some of the more obscure cameos, which some of you may or may not pick up on in this movie, all of which are from the Howard family that tend to make many cameos throughout his movies, those being Ron Howard's father Rance, also his brother Clint, and although she's completely unrecognizable, there's also a pre-famous Bryce Dallas Howard. Now, while it may surprise some, Ron Howard's The Grinch, while making a ton of money upon its release and being looked back on now by audience members, both old and new, with great fondness, the movie itself wasn't well received by a large amount of critics at the time. But you know someone who wasn't surprised by this?
Who could have predicted this?
Me. Not because I think The Grinch was poorly made, understand, but having done this for a while, it was nothing short of completely predictable that critics didn't click with this movie when it first came out. But hey, this was the late 90s, early 2000s era where critics absolutely sucked at their jobs. Some of which still somehow managed to keep their employment. To this very day, despite being completely useless knobs when it comes to judging the quality of movies. And unfortunately, it's only mildly improved, since many idiots are still seen as the loudest critical authority, especially online. And while it shows what they knew, which is nothing, because The Grinch, like many films that came out around that same time period, have also stood the test of time and are now widely seen as classics. Such movies include, but are certainly not limited to, End of Days, The Man in the Iron Mask, Jingle All the Way, Shut Up, I'm Not Done, Tears of the Sun, Lethal Weapon 4, Ace Ventura 1 and 2, Jumanji, and probably most notably the Star Wars prequels. Yeah, that's damn right, and you bet your ass I could keep going if I wanted to.
Can you feel that? Huh? Can you feel it?
Point is, critics are dog shit, and that Ron Howard's The Grinch That Stole Christmas, as of the current year, with a legacy that spans more than 2 decades, is widely considered to be a classic, and rightfully so.
It's the holiday season. Yeah. Grinch has become such a staple for everyone.
Well, yeah, what a lucky thing in my life, I'll tell you. It really makes me feel good.
That's what I was wondering from your perspective. Like, the film means so much to us. What does it mean to you?
For me, growing up, there were movies like It's a Wonderful Life and things like that. And of course, I watched the Grinch cartoon when I was growing up. And these are staples that every year, that's just Christmas, you know? And how it happened, my gosh, I don't know. But I'm so gratified by the idea that's, you know, one of the Yule logs people go to, you know? And so when it pops up every year, I'm really happy about it. It's a lovely thing.
The movie is still just as fun now to watch as it was then. Hell, I'd even argue it's better with age, because like most excellent children's films, you can pick up on some of the cleverly disguised adult humor as well that's being thrown into the mix.
Hey, honey, our baby's here! He looks just like your boss.
The Grinch Who Stole Christmas is a great film and a timeless classic Christmas movie that stays true to its original source material, amplifies the morals and lessons of the original story, and adds a ton of its own creative personality and charm that allows audiences to be entertained and engaged for the entirety of its runtime. It's a film I make effort to watch every Christmas season, as I'm sure many of you do. I always wanted to talk about this movie, and I'm glad I got to do it for Christmas this year. So on that note,
Merry Christmas, one and all!
And to all a good night. I'll see you all next time, and I hope you all have a happy new year.